Hello, everyone. Welcome back to NRL Nostradamus for this week's review of the Dragons, the Dolphins, and the Raiders. But before we get into it, Dicko, if you haven't seen it on our socials yet, guys, we have done a Movember merch drop to raise money for the Movember Foundation. As you can see, I've started early. I'm sporting this filthy mo. For anyone watching the video, and poor Dicko who's got to see that caterpillar on the top lip. Um, Unfortunately, it's got a little bit of ginger in it as well, so the wife loves it.
Yeah, I bet she does.
Yeah, 25% of all sales will go to the Movember Foundation. So get around us, guys. All merch is available now online in all sizes and all items. We're also going to be adding a stubby cooler on there for purchase individually for those just wanting a stubby cooler. But if you get any of the other packs, you'll get a free stubby cooler as part of it anyway. So get around it, guys, and help support an amazing foundation. Another shout out as well to our sponsors, Grip Socks. Use our code Nostra20 at checkout to get a whopping discount. Uh, Look, guys, they're the most comfiest socks I've ever used. If you want to use them for Pilates, for sport, uh, whatever you need them for, Grip Socks has you covered from the heart of Australia to your feet. That's GRIPZSOCKS. All right, Dicko, let's get into it, mate. The St. George Illawarra Dragons finished in 11th place. For those who are listening for the first time, we're going from bottom to top. So if you haven't heard the teams below from Wooden Spoon up to 12th, check them out. We've done 2 episodes already and we're working our way to the top with the Storm and Panthers to round out our reviews. 11 wins for the Dragons, 13 losses. This could have been a very different story, Dicko,
Mm.
with the Dragons heading into a really dominant position to make that top eight. And
Mm.
yeah, mate, they put the dog collar on and choked big time.
Yep.
Home wins 6, away wins only 5. Dicko, for you, mate, who was the biggest disappointment for the Dragons this season?
I thought the Dragons actually overachieved firstly. So I thought I actually had them in the bottom sort of two
Mm,
at the start of the season were my predictions. So I reckon they overachieved, but their last sort of 3 games of the season when eighth position was up for grabs or 7 and 8 were dismal really. And it's affected my grading of them a little bit. So
mm,
I was going to give them a solid C because I thought they had an okay season from where I actually had them predicted.
yeah, yep,
Um, so I've downgraded them purely on the last 3 games because the most recent form sits in your mind, right?
yes,
So
absolutely.
I've gone C minus. I've still given them an okay. I'd give them a pass mark again from where I had them. Um, but yeah, my MVP. I couldn't split 2 players actually. I thought Zach Lomax was outstanding on the wing.
Yep.
Um, Realistically, you shouldn't be giving an MVP to the winger. Like, come on. Like, come on.
Hey, mate, he was probably their best player.
But
Let's
I
be
thought he,
honest.
but again, I thought he was outstanding. He was outstanding during State of Origin for New South Wales, and he's shown in the Test matches currently on in the Pacific Championships. He's been outstanding for Australia on the wing, and Parramatta next season have a big decision to make on where they play him because I'm not
Yeah,
convinced that he's a centre. To be perfectly honest with you,
and the goal
um,
kicker as well.
and the goal kicker, yeah.
Yeah,
And I thought I want to give an honourable. I thought he was neck and neck with him actually. Jacob Little, I thought he was excellent. I thought he was in the top sort of consistently 5 hookers in the competition for the whole season. When he played, they looked a completely different team. When he was out, they basically had no one there. Again, it's going to
yeah.
be interesting to see, and we'll preview this next year. What happens to him because Damien Cook's coming, so he's coming off a fantastic season. I'm not sure. I think he's a starting nine for in the NRL, so I'm not
Mm.
sure where his future lies.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to go with Ben Hunt off the bench, or not Ben Hunt, sorry. I don't know if they're going to go with Cook off the bench or Little off the bench, or
Mm,
maybe see them change position a little bit. Maybe
yeah,
we'll see what happens.
yeah, that'll be a watch
Um,
this space. I think
who was the biggest disappointment though for you?
my Ben Hunt.
Ben Hunt.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, again, last week I mentioned that I sort of based my disappointment on what you're getting paid and what your output is, right?
mm,
I must admit, I think Ben Hunt he wasn't ordinary, but I didn't think he had a great State of Origin series from previous series, and I
Yep.
thought that flowed on into his footy. I don't think he had a great season. I don't think he had a really poor season. But if you're commanding 1.2, 1.1, 1.2 million a season, you've got to be leading your team as the halfback, the captain of the club, better than what he did the season just gone. So I
Yeah.
think,
90% of the time, you
yeah,
got to
yeah,
be the best player
exactly.
on the park.
Exactly. So I think for me, I think it was an easy decision to come through the biggest disappointment in Ben Hunt, purely because just how much money he takes up on the salary cap and what he produced, right?
Yeah. Well, interesting you say that. In terms of player of the year for the Dragons, just before I give my gradings and who I thought was the disappointment MVP and most improved, Jaden Sewer actually
Mm.
got given player of the year. I thought he had a great season. Did you have him as your most improved, or is that Jacob Little's spot?
No, I had my most improved actually, and I do want to mention Jaden Sewer because he was sort of it came down to three players, and he was in the three for the MVP.
Yep.
Um, I thought he was a bit stiff not to get Queensland game 2 and 3, because I thought he was playing really well. But my most improved, and I've based this again from last week. I've sort of based this on who I thought improved the most from season to season, and I've actually given that purely because last year he was sort of on the outer, or the
Mm,
season
mm.
before the one just gone. To what he produced this year, State of Origin Australian rep, Zach Lomax. You can't tell me that he wasn't the most improved for the Dragons, right? Like he was on the outer, he went from centre to wing,
Yeah.
and his goal kicking was abysmal the season prior. I think he was kicking at 60% to
Got
this
dropped to
year,
reserve grade.
got dropped to reserve grade to this season. Oh, yeah, so if I look across the board, he's had the biggest improvement out of all their players, I think.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I mean, I don't know how Dragons feel about their signing spree and whatever's going on behind the scenes at the moment, because there's a little bit of noise around with the Dragons. But got voted the members' player of the year, Zach Lomax. There wasn't a player's player as such.
Hmm.
Rookie of the year actually went to Lycan King Togia, the guy that played a couple of games towards the back end in replace of Flanagan, who I thought was actually
Yeah, I thought he was quite
pretty
good.
good.
Yeah.
Um, and originally I'd actually forgotten about poor young Flano, because he'd been suspended for the last few weeks of the season.
Yeah.
But if Ben Hunt does go, I don't think they're going to miss him too much, even though he led try assists for the season out of any player, by the way,
Mm.
which is a little bit of a shock to me. I'm not going to lie.
Hmm.
Uh, but I did give most improved to Jacob Little. I thought
Hmm.
he was unbelievable.
Hmm.
He was probably second best hooker, close with Mitch Kenny to Harry Grant
Mm.
for the season. I think out
Mm.
of any hooker in the comp.
Mm.
So massive kudos to Jake there. Again, we mentioned before. I don't know what's going to happen with him with Cookie coming next year. I just hope he doesn't miss out. And if he does, don't be surprised if he goes to another club.
I think he has to, doesn't he? Really,
Yeah, you wouldn't want to play second fiddle after having that season.
Well, Damien Cook's an 80-minute player, and so is he. So one of them's going to have something's going to have to
Yeah.
give there. I would have thought.
My MVP though, Zach Lomax. And couldn't agree more with you, mate. Ben Hunt, absolute major disappointment. Now, I had a little bit of a similar theory to you when it came to grading.
Yeah.
Uh, and I run through how we came to this conclusion because I'll mention like their worst loss of the season undoubtedly was that 44-40 game against Parramatta.
Oh, how bad was that?
Uh, it wasn't their biggest loss of the season, but their poorest loss
Mm.
when everything was on the line. I mean, it was 44-10, I think, with 10 minutes to go. So
Hmm.
they made the scoreline look pretty respectable, but they lost 38-0 to the Dolphins in round two, which is just disgraceful. And on Anzac Day, supposed to be one of the biggest games of the
Yes.
year, they got pumped by the Chooks 60-18, where Sammy Walker just ran rampant. However, you flip the coin and they smashed the Tigers 56-14 when they
Mm.
were really struggling and the Tigers were actually gaining a little bit of momentum. So that was exciting. And, who can't forget in round 22 when they beat the Storm in Melbourne 18-16.
Hmm.
It's just amazing how you can go from beating the Storm in Melbourne, challenging for the eight, and then completely
Mm.
shit the bed.
Mm.
and come 11th.
Yeah, couldn't agree.
Like,
Couldn't agree more.
absolutely disgraceful. Anyway, I originally had them written down for a C, and I scribbled it out and had given them a D, but I'm going to meet them halfway and go D plus because I agree with you, Dicko. I had them in my bottom two. They
Yeah.
were not looking good this season, and they've got some really great signings that have already arrived and are coming. So watch this space, guys.
Well,
Stay tuned.
they've got to be contenders next season, and we'll, as I said, we'll talk about that more when we preview them.
Contenders for the comp, you think?
No, 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 contenders for the 8, not the
Oh, I was
comp.
going to say,
No,
geez, don't get Dragons fans too
no,
excited.
no, geez, no, just calm down, Dragons fans. You're about 12 years away.
Not long now. All right, let's give another shout out to our other sponsor, Create Merchandise, before we get into the Dolphins review. They've got the ability to provide tailored end-to-end service and branding for promotional product and apparel. You can see we're sporting some of their goods there. Dicko's got the cap on as well. All our gears via Create. Amazing people. Mention them for a discount. www.cr8.sydney. If you need anything for corporate, for schools, for sports, uniforms, products, apparel, you name it, they've got it. They'll sort you out. Now, Dicko, Dolphins, 10th spot, last game of the season versus the Knights to make the 8. Obviously, the Knights won that game and they missed the 8, dropped down to 10th. It's a bit of a shock that the Raiders came 9th, but we'll get into them soon. And as a result, I've given them a pretty nice grading, the old Raiders, because I think I tipped them for the wooden spoon and we gave them an almighty spray with about 10 games to go. And they turned the corner and absolutely turned it on.
Don't bring me into the spray, mate. You were the one you sprayed Sticky, not me.
Let's let's see how. Sorry, Sticky. We'd love to have you on as a guest. Mate.
Yeah, we would actually.
Player of the year, Max Plath. Player's player, Max Plath. Most improved, Max Plath. He cleaned up at the Dolphins Awards. These are the Dolphins Awards, guys, not our awards. Rookie of the year went to Jack Bostock, who also won Dally M Rookie of the Year, which I thought a couple of the guys in contention there got robbed to a degree because I thought Jack Bostock was okay. I didn't think he was amazing. He sort of went MIA in those big games. I would have liked to seen the Rookie of the Year sort of stand up in those games like Ethan Strange, which we'll talk about soon. Dicko, 6 wins at home, 5 away. So far, we haven't really seen too many lopsided home and away results, which is really interesting because does that mean that, this is a little bit left field and off the cuff here, mate. Does that mean that home ground advantage isn't that big anymore?
It's really interesting because it should be, right?
Yeah.
It should be. So be interesting, those Dolphins games, those home games. Will that be interesting if we sort of
whether they're KO or something.
Well, yeah, and I know CJ is away today. He's not well, so be interesting. We can't sort of look that up right now, but it'd be interesting to see like whether the bigger stadium. I mean, I think the bigger stadiums. So if you have a bigger stadium as a home ground, I feel like that's
or a packed stadium.
Yeah, not to. Yeah. I don't know whether that's to your advantage because teams will get up to play in big stadiums. Like Broncos every week at Suncorp, 40,000 people at least. Every team visiting is going to get up for it, right? But
so you think it's a matter of the opposition actually rising to the occasion?
Absolutely.
Right.
So I reckon Manly's home ground would be home ground advantage would be significant because who wants to go out and play on a dog park? You know what I mean?
They got it packed out pretty good. But
no, they did.
Fair, 90 because no one's going to the northern beaches. Let's be honest.
Exactly right.
Unless you live there. So 90% Manly, maybe more.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know whether it's as big a factor anymore because I just think teams are so good and so well prepared. So it's I don't know, and the fans, especially in those Sydney stadiums, don't really. Well, I don't live in Sydney from what I can see from the TV. Apart from like Penrith, which is for full house every game. I mean, maybe Parramatta the odd occasion, but do they get full stadiums? I don't think they get full stadiums.
When they're playing at ANZ Stadium, they'll be lucky to have 25% full.
Exactly.
It's a disgrace.
How can either team get up for that? You know what I mean?
I remember going to a Bulldogs Broncos games one year.
Yeah.
And both were in finals contention. There was 8,000. It was It was disgusting.
Yeah, I
Um,
know.
coming from Queensland, when you're used to Suncorp Stadium and a roaring atmosphere pretty much every single game, to
Very
not get
fortunate,
that
yeah.
was a bit of a shock to the system. Now, Dicko,
Mm.
let's go into some of their results.
Hmm.
Their worst loss of the season was undoubtedly against that Storm match, round 25. Seriously, I don't know if the Dolphins were shocking, which they were, or Melbourne were just hot. Like Jerome Hughes ran an absolute muck.
Mm.
Um, I can't remember which winger it was, but I'm pretty sure Warbrick scored 3 tries that game. Hughes scored 3 tries. Um, yeah, pedestrian. It was like the most line breaks in a game ever,
Yep.
or something like that.
Yeah, it's
Like,
ridiculous.
yeah, it was crazy. 48-6, they got absolutely
Yeah,
belted.
it's a joke.
Um, when your season's on the line, you just want to see your team. Like if they lost 24-12, everyone goes, yeah, nice.
Mm. Mm.
Like, but otherwise, 48-6 and get, absolutely dismantled. And it could have been 60, 70 points to be fair. Because
Yeah.
I think Melbourne made about 15 errors that game as well. So the Dolphins probably got off light.
Yeah.
And then you flip the switch because in round 25, it was 48-6 to the Storm. Round 26, they beat the Broncos 40-6.
Mm.
Like, again, consistency huge, and probably was the thing that stopped the Dolphins making that next step into the 8. To be fair, though, I think they did okay, and I'm actually going
Yeah.
to change my mark to them from a C to a C plus.
Maybe we should grade as we talk about this from now on because the more we talk about it, the more you want to change your grade, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I've just done a cheeky change there. So C plus for the Dolphins. Who was your biggest disappointment? Who didn't step up this year?
So I've gone a C. I've gone a solid C. I thought they were okay. I thought
Yep,
second season in the comp, thought they were okay. So I thought
yep,
I'd give them a pass mark.
pass. Yep, nothing more,
Disappoint,
nothing less.
yeah,
Yep,
disappointing end of the season, but the more you develop some of their younger players, the more that should
yep,
improve, right? So
yep,
they should be real contenders next year for
yep,
the
yep.
eight.
My
All right.
plus was for them contending for the 8
Yep. Yeah.
in the last
Again.
game. That
Yeah.
was it.
Again.
Yeah.
Again. So my biggest disappointment, and I literally have thought about this just before we got on, and I'm very harsh here because I think they've both been outstanding servants to rugby league. The two Bromwich brothers.
Oh, that is a huge call, and I actually agree with it a little bit.
So if there's ever a case where I feel like you play one season too long,
Mm,
and again, I'm picking on him because I think I thought his first season at the Dolphins, he led fantastically well. And
yeah,
at stages this year, I thought he was excellent, but I thought I thought the game really sort of caught up to him and he really sort of struggled. I know he had some injuries and whatnot, but yeah,
yeah.
and I just thought Kenny just didn't provide the impact that he normally does. Like,
He looked a little unfit, Kenny.
yeah, he looked underdone. I would say not
Yeah,
unfit. I'd say
yeah,
underdone. And just I don't know whether they know where to sort of play him.
yeah.
They've got some really good young back rowers. And
Yep, they
he
had Max Plus playing 13 until
Max
JMK
Plath
got
played
injured.
13, and he's and I would keep Max there at 13, for the future.
Yep.
But
I would go
yeah,
as far as to say if JMK didn't get injured, I reckon they make the 8.
yeah, you could be right. Yeah, yep. Well, they
Yep.
definitely. I don't feel like they definitely would have finished the season like they did, but yeah. So the Bromwich brothers, I thought, just were from what we come to expect of them, for how good they were in Melbourne, and the first season with the Dolphins. I thought they underperformed this season, and I know it's
Mm.
harsh, and a lot of people won't agree with me, but
Mm.
when I looked at the list, and I know who your biggest disappointment is because we spoke about it just before, and you'll tell the viewers shortly. And I thought you're harsh on your biggest disappointment. I must admit. But yeah, I expect more from guys that have played 200 to 300 games than what they produced.
Yep. Yep. The yeah, I am going to be pretty harsh here. I want to apologise in advance to Isaiah Katoa. Uh, I thought at the start of the season he was the difference between the Dolphins last year and the Dolphins this year. I thought he really elevated his game. And the
Mm-hmm.
first third to a half of the season, I thought he was unbelievable.
Yep.
Kicking game was on point,
Mm-hmm.
organisation, running into the line, some really nice short balls, some nice plays out the back, Hammer scoring tries. Look, honestly, they did get a bit lucky on a few occasions with Hammer scoring length of the field tries, and we've put up a few reels of Hammer's talents there. But soon as the going got tough and players got injured
Mm-hmm.
and teams started working their way into the comp. Some teams traditionally start a bit slower and peak towards the end of the season. Some teams come out of the blocks like the Cowboys did and were leading the comp for the first few rounds and then sort of teetered away a little bit and then finished off strongly. But if you're going to be a halfback at a club, and he'll know this, and hopefully he doesn't take too much offense to this, but next season he'll be way better for what happened this season. But he was a disappointment because if he had kept the standard that he did at the start of the season, I'd go as far as to say that they also make the eight, let alone JMK getting injured. Because what they had Sean O'Sullivan come into the squad, poor Cody Nikarima was probably one of their best players for the year, and to be honest, I've actually got him as my most improved, Cody Nikarima. I thought he really stepped up. I think he's really unlucky not to play for the Kiwis, actually, in recent times.
Mm-hmm.
To play Chance Nickel Clockstad at 6 over Cody Nikarima is a travesty. But I'm
Yeah,
sure they'll
seriously.
change that next game. And if they don't, then
I just want to I just want to put your biggest disappointment here into perspective a little bit because
yep.
as I said, I think you're harsh and
Mm,
I do disagree with you to a point. I understand why you've gone for him, but I disagree.
mm,
So yes, halfback needs to do. So what you said about halfback, what they need to do on a weekly basis, completely agree.
yep.
Second year, second full season of first grade, the kid's
Yep.
20. The kid's
Yep.
20. So this is a classic case of starting the first 15, would you say 15 rounds? I reckon 15 rounds of the season.
Mm,
He was excellent. Kicking game was outstanding. Their whole attack flowed off him effectively, him and Hammer, right?
yeah.
And I just feel like young kid, NRL's a tough gig for 27 weeks to stay up, and I just think it caught up with him. So
Yeah.
I think year 3, year 4, year 5, you're going to start really seeing him
Oh,
come into his
he'll
own.
be unbelievable in the future. I mean,
Mm,
he was supposed to be the replacement for Jerome Luai
mm.
at one point, and then obviously wanted to, play full time. And good on him.
Now,
Because
yeah, and we will never know this, but Wayne has a way of shielding his young players when he feels like their form's dipping. And
mm,
again, we will never know the reasons why he wasn't selected in some of the sides,
yeah.
but rather than form, yes, his form wasn't probably of where it was earlier in the season, but I feel like that was a way of Wayne going, okay, mate, we're going to give you a rest here
Mm.
because we can start to see that you're really struggling physically to get through the
Yeah,
season.
get through the season, yeah.
And I think that's probably good
And
coaching.
I reckon, mate, I reckon you're 100% right.
Mm.
And and believe me, Dolphins fans, there's plenty to look forward to because you've made some really good signings to replace Jesse Bromwich next year with Daniel Saifidi. Has Kenny retired as well?
No, not that I'm aware
No.
of. No.
Okay, maybe he should.
What I want to
Um,
say with Katoa, right? Just lastly on Katoa, if we think back to Nathan Cleary, Jerome Luai at that age 19, 20,
mm,
all right? James Maloney was at Penrith at that point in time, playing
yep,
5'8" and leading. And there was a
yep.
couple of games where they got absolutely belted. You would know as a Penrith
Oh
fan,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. It's terrible.
So I can see similar. No, I'm not saying Isaiah Katoa is going to turn out to be a 4-time premiership players like Luai and Cleary, but I'm saying I can see comparisons of how it is really difficult for young players to come in and be up for 27 plus 4 weeks of finals. You're talking 31 weeks of footy. It's
Yeah.
really tough.
Well, a lot of the top elite players, like Cleary, you know, fortunately, maybe in a way, has been injured for the last few years to stay fresh for the finals because if he had played every game,
Yeah,
plus
who
for New
knows?
South Wales. Who knows whether he would
Exactly.
have burnt out as well.
Yeah.
Um,
So from that, I just thought you're a little harsh on him. I want to give the young bloke, some kudos because I thought he was actually quite good to start the season. And you're right, his form did dip away towards the end of the
mm,
season, but yeah, he wouldn't have. Well, he's definitely not my biggest disappointment from that team.
yeah. Actually, what do you think of Hammer?
Well, their whole team revolves around Hamaso Tabuai-Fidow, so um,
Because I've seen a couple of other pundits out there calling Hammer their biggest disappointment for the year.
I disagree with
Mm,
that
mm,
completely.
yep,
I feel like if he doesn't play well, they don't play well. It's as simple as that.
yep,
And that's a
yep,
big burden to bear, right? And again, he's only young. I mean,
yep.
he's effectively still a kid.
I've actually got an honourable mention here for most improved to Max Plath because yeah, he was unbelievable.
I've gone him
And
too. I've gone him too. Yeah. Yep.
but I do want to give a massive shout to Felice Kafusi.
Turned the clock back, didn't he, a little bit?
He was like on par with the Bromwich brothers in falling into a hole.
Mm.
And he just went, I don't know whether it was something at the start of the season where he just
Is the
got real
haircut, mate?
fit, or
The
yeah, maybe
haircut.
it was the backwards Mike Tyson or Ronaldo, wasn't it? Sorry.
It was the toupee on the back of the head.
Oh dear, oh dear. Uh, but yeah, he made the Queensland team in the end
Yeah,
for
yeah.
game 3. Like unbelievable. And I think we got the same MVP here, mate. Who did you give it to?
So again, I've gone honourable mention Max Plath
Yep.
because I thought he was outstanding. If he doesn't play for Queensland next year, I will be very surprised.
Mm-hmm.
I think he could be an excellent 14 moving forward for Queensland now that I can't see Ben Hunt being in the best 17 for Queensland.
Yep.
So my MVP, I thought Herbie Farnworth. I thought he was outstanding
Yep.
every game he played. If you look at it, and I haven't looked at individual statistics through every game, but I reckon he'd be at least in the top 3 or 4 when he was fitting on the field in terms of run meters for them. Um,
Absolutely.
if he
Do you know
learns
what?
if he learns to pass right to left, Jack Boxstock would probably score about 5 or 6 more tries.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I thought, yeah,
Osako as well. I
yeah,
think he shifted a couple of sides.
but I thought, yeah, he was outstanding, and their
I,
whole attack revolves around him.
I'm glad you mentioned that because yeah, Herbie was my MVP as well. I'll go as far as to say that if Herbie Farmworth can add a little bit of deception to his game by the way of passing or dumbing as opposed to just running the ball every single time he gets it,
Mm.
he could be one of the best players in the game. Full stop.
So I've got him as top 2 centers in the game.
Yeah. Behind who?
I don't have him behind him. I've got him even keel because they're two very different players.
Yeah.
But I got him and Stephen Crichton as the 2 elite centers of the competition.
Yeah. And you can see the difference between Stephen Crichton and Farmworth is the draw and pass that Critter creates
Yeah.
is huge.
Yeah.
Because you don't know whether he's running it or passing it.
Mm.
Whereas I would say Herbie's a better runner of the ball than Critter.
Absolutely. Yeah, agree.
But if he added that extra, and you know what? In the game against Samoa on the weekend, he
Mm.
actually set up a try by doing exactly that. So if
Mm.
he can do more of that, he's going to be elite. Elite.
But again, mid-20s coming into the prime now,
Yeah.
on big money. We expect more. So yeah, I thought
Another
he was
player the
outstanding.
Broncos let go. That's thriving.
Yeah, we reviewed them last week, mate. Let's just forget about them.
All right. Now, the Canberra Raiders. Ricky. Seriously, well done to the Raiders in coming ninth because at the start of the year, I tipped them to come wooden spoon. I thought that they were in big trouble in terms of their depth. And to be fair, they were tested, but some of the players that stepped up this season was incredible. I'm going to jump straight into most improved.
Mm-hmm.
KO Weeks and Xavier Savage are equal for me in that category.
So I've got 2 as well, actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So Xavier Savage at one point there, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but I thought this bloke's going to quit. This guy's just going to quit rugby league because he came in, he was rapid, probably needed to put a bit of size on. But to his credit, he's gone back to New South Wales Cup, worked his absolute ring off,
Mm,
come back in this year. And yeah, he still has an error or two in his game, and he's still
mm,
probably not where he can be, which is exciting for Raiders fans. But I thought he improved out of sight. And KO
yeah.
Weeks, I dead set thought he was going to be the biggest liability, and he turned out to be one of their biggest assets
Mm,
for the year, and shifted from essentially running the show when Jamal Fogarty got injured to then filling in at fullback when
mm,
Rapana got injured, and then
mm,
playing that good that the Rapana had to go to the wing. Subsequently, he's now retired, but he's
mm.
almost their future potential halfback, potential fullback, potential 5'8". Like he's a, 14. Like he could play anywhere.
Mm. Yep.
He's an excitement machine, and yeah, the Raiders have a very bright future, mate. What about you, Dicko?
So I've also want to give a mention to Savage because I actually really thought about sticking him in this most
Mm,
improved. Good signs. I think he's a Queenslander as well, so potentially keeps playing well. There might be an opportunity there for him.
yep.
Although we'll have to displace some really good players. I've actually gone similar to you. I've gone KO Weeks. I thought he was outstanding.
Mm,
In the same mold as Keanu Kinney from the Titans, really sort of bursts on the scene and then
yeah.
sort of everything revolves around them, right? So,
Yep.
and then I've gone Ethan Strange. I thought he's
Yep.
going to turn into a really good footballer. I think the Fogarty Strange combination will work well in the future. And I feel like another season under their belt, they'll push. They'll push. Well, they finished ninth this year. There's no reason why they can't again be pushing for that. I don't. I can't. Their squad's not a top four squad.
No.
But I can definitely see them sneaking in 7, 8.
Yeah, I think they'll play around the 8 again.
Mm,
They, I mean, we'll go on to the MVP in a second, but Rookie of the Year obviously got given to Ethan Strange. Coach's Award got given to KO Weeks.
hmm
They had 7 wins at home, 5 away. Let's read out some of their results before we go into our grading. And this is why they just, I don't know, these teams around this spot, they're just so
But
inconsistent.
and they were just frustrating, weren't they?
Oh,
Because you tip them one week because they were outstanding the week before, and then they just shit the bed.
like there's 3 games that I want to read out here. Um, they lost to the Tigers 48-24. Like they got belted by the Tigers. They nearly got 50 points put on them by the Tigers. Like seriously. And you miss out on the 8. If they won that game, they come 8th.
Yeah, no.
Against the
Yeah.
top, like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Um, the game against the Cowboys was one of the worst games I've ever watched them play. I think that's when we ripped them.
Yep.
And then they went on.
Hey, you ripped him.
Oh,
I
sorry.
didn't.
Then they went on and beat Penrith. I think they beat the Storm. Yeah, anyway, or gave the Storm. No, they beat the Chooks. Sorry. Yeah,
Mm,
they had some unbelievable results. Uh, yeah, 42-4 they lost to the Cowboys. And then in Canberra, they lost 40-0 to the Sharks. Like, fair
yeah, that
enough, Sharks are top
was.
4, but at home at GIO Stadium, no one wants to go there.
Yep.
And it was in round 8, so it was smack bang the middle of winter, absolutely freezing.
Mm,
The
mm.
boys from Cronulla would not have wanted to play there.
No.
Like,
No.
and 40-0, like, come on. And as I said, then they go beat Penrith. Um, and they beat the Eels 41-8, which seriously, when we analyse the Eels, I think that was their poorest game of the season.
Mm, mm.
But in terms of the biggest disappointment as an individual,
Mhm.
who did you have, Dicko, for the Raiders?
Um, I had Corey Horsburgh,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and
Yep.
I think we've forgotten what impact he can have on that Raiders team. And I don't know what happened. I know he was injured. I know he had a lengthy suspension when he was in New South Wales Cup. But I don't know what happened. He played for Queensland season 23.
Yeah. Yeah.
Game
I know
3,
he
wasn't it?
was I know he was injured in preseason, so he
Mm.
obviously missed that opportunity to get himself rock hard fit for the start of the season.
But then
But
he comes back to New South Wales Cup, punches someone in the face and misses
yeah,
another whatever, and then doesn't
yeah.
get back into the team. Then he got into the team, and
Mm.
then all of a sudden, shit, he's actually
Here
a
we
really
go.
here we
Yeah,
go. The
he's
big
back.
Horsburgh's up and the big red. He's up and away.
Well, because I think at the time there was a lot of rumors swirling that he was gonna. I think he was gonna go to the Broncos at one point.
Mm,
He was gonna
mm,
go to the Raiders, the Eels, whoever was putting their hand up. He was just trying to get a gig
mm,
because he couldn't get a run in Sticky side, and knowing how Sticky operates, like full credit to Sticky. Like, I'm just going to throw it out there. He made some really harsh calls this year. I don't agree still with a couple of them, but this one was a great call by
Yeah,
Ricky
yeah,
because Corey Horsburgh was not up to scratch physically, mentally, and he went, mate, until you sort yourself out, you're not playing. You can
yeah,
find another club if you want,
yeah,
but you
yeah,
need to sort yourself out first.
yeah.
And to Horsburgh's credit, he did that and he came back and he's staying with the Raiders, and that's exciting for Raiders fans.
Well, I was looking from him to really sort of go to the next level, play for Queensland, as I said, in 23, I think game three. So around those really elite players in those camps and whatnot, I was looking for him to go to the next level. And I thought
Yep.
he, for me, was just disappointing it that he didn't. And as again, we know injury plays a part, but he didn't sort of take
Yep.
his game to the next level. And
Oh,
yeah, I
look,
thought
I
that was
think you'll see a
disappointing.
completely different Corey Horsburgh next year, and I think you'll find that he'll be making up for lost time and making up for that quickly. I
I
wouldn't be
mean,
surprised to see him in Queensland side
I
again.
hope so because I feel like as a Queensland supporter, I feel like
Oh, we need him.
we need a bit of a dog, is what I call it.
Yeah,
A bit of
bit
a
of mongrel.
scrapper, bit of mongrel. Yep.
Yep, couldn't agree more, mate. Let's go to the MVP. I'm sure that every person in Australia and New Zealand would be all over this guy. He got the player of the year as well. None other than Joseph Tarpany.
Yeah, agree. He's. I mean, I think sums up the player and the person at his. And I actually watched it. His speech on
Yep,
awards night,
captain next year.
captain next year. I mean, the bloke is a colossus, leading the team from the front. So yeah, I didn't. No one else came into my calculations for MVP of the Raiders this season. I thought without him, they are just lost.
Yep, yep. No more to add there. Absolutely sensational. Joseph Tarpany, take a bow, and Raiders fans, a lot to look forward
What
to
grade? What grade?
next season. Mate, the grade. I had C before we came on air,
Stop changing them, mate.
which is very harsh. I've given them a B. I've given them a solid B.
Oh.
I haven't given them an A because I think that's a little bit OTT. Uh, B for me, I think, is a fair assessment just based on the fact that I had them sort of right down the bottom, if not on the bottom. And they've probably proved a lot of people wrong. Even probably their own fans weren't that optimistic at the start of the year. And now all of a sudden they got heaps to look forward to. And if they make the top 8 next year, I think that will be, a feat that they should be striving for.
Yep. Yep.
I was thinking, sort of 5-year rebuild going on here,
Hmm.
but they're going to sign a couple of players in the next couple of weeks. So once
Hmm.
again, watch this space. I think we mentioned on the previous episode we're going to have a little juicy segment commencing next week, I believe,
Hmm.
with a certain individual, which is going to be really exciting. Uh, so yeah, watch this space because I think they're going to add a couple of players to the fray. With Corey Horsburgh firing on all cylinders, Joseph Tarpany taking the reins as captain, KO Weeks thriving in that fullback position. I think they're
Yep.
they're looking good. What was your grade, mate?
So they didn't make the finals, so I can't give them any higher than a B minus. So I've
Mm.
gone, and I thought they were lucky actually to get a B minus because again, the NRL's cutthroat. Your successful season is you make the 8 or the top 4, you win the premiership. Other than that, it's an average season. So, but yeah, I gave them a B minus because of where we thought they would be to where they
Yep.
ended up. I originally had them down for a C plus, but yeah, I'm feeling a little generous towards the end of this podcast, so I bumped it up to a B minus.
That's right. Fair play, fair play. And look, next week we will be starting on that top 8. So we might be giving a few higher grades to some of these teams. Maybe not so
Maybe
much.
not. Maybe
Maybe not
not.
so much.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Got a special guest joining us tomorrow as well, Dicko. So
Hmm.
we'll leave that one in the open for the viewers, but that'll be an exciting chat. And other than that, guys, thanks heaps for tuning in. Give us a follow. Shout out to the Movember drop for merch again. 25% of all sales proceeds going to charity there. So get around it, guys.
Disclaimer: any views or opinions represented in this podcast and or Facebook and social media pages are personal and belong solely to the podcast owners and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owners may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. Unless explicitly stated, any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, organization, club, company, or individual. All content provided on this podcast is for informational purposes only. The owners of this podcast make no representation as to the accuracy or completeness of any information on this site or found by following any link on this website. Owners will not be liable for any errors or omissions in this information, nor for the availability of this information. The owners will not be liable for any losses, injuries, or damages from the display or use of this information.